Now I will go over the top 5 alternatives we identified with the use of the ranking priority number (RPN) and the analysis between available alternatives and the factors that are addressed by each alternative. The first alternative we identified as one of our top 5 is to make a requirement from the beginning of the design to have consistent layout of controls between different models of planes. With the implementation of this alternative, we will address 4 out of the 5 major factors and 1 minor factor. By making a requirement to have consistent layout of controls, we will address the need of having all pilots oriented because all models will have very similar control layout. We also explicitly address the fact of having radical control layout change. Also, from a procedural start flow, we will have the same clockwise systematic startup between all models of planes. And with this alternative, it will help eliminate the fact that the designer didn't consider the fact that it was going to be difficult for a pilot during a war situation to quickly pick up and identify the controls to start up the plane. And finally, from a startup procedure, we considered that having consistent layout controls will help to have less steps because pilots will not be wasting time trying to figure out where the controls are. At the bottom of the slide, we can see a table with the RPN analysis we performed for this alternative. From a schedule standpoint, we said it shouldn't add extra time to the design of the plane. From a cost perspective, we think that the impact is going to be moderate. At the end, we have a requirement that the designer must meet, which could add cost to the design. For resources, we think it will not take substantial increase of resources, so we keep that one low at 3. The implementation of this alternative is not a guarantee, but we consider that keeping the controls on the same location should be highly effective. Our second alternative is to have a quick orientation user manual that will give the pilot a quick reference in case he gets into the scenario of having to fly a plane on which he didn't receive orientation. It gives the pilot a quick way to identify critical controls even if the plane has radical layout control change. It also helps to address the startup procedure flow and the fact that the designer didn't do a good job on designing the control layout because pilots will have something to refer to. We also consider that this alternative will help with the step required to start up the plane and will improve the pilot's reaction time. The implementation of this alternative should be short schedule, low cost, and low resources, but we think that the effectiveness will be lowered towards the 7. A third top alternative is having the designer to be a pilot and understanding the requirements of pilots during war, where everyone needs to be effective quickly. By understanding this fact, the designer wouldn't make radical layout control changes. The start flow procedure will remain consistent between planes. This alternative explicitly addressed the fact that the plane designer was not a pilot and therefore didn't understand pilot requirements during war. It will also improve the startup procedure, making it faster. Implementation of this alternative could take long time because it will require designers to be trained as pilots or hire only designers that have been trained as pilots. Costs will be high and you will need moderate amount of resources. We think that a well-trained pilot working as a designer should be a very effective building systems. A fourth top alternative is the use of symbols and colors for easy identification of the main controls. With this alternative, we address 4 out of 5 major factors and 1 minor factor. The use of colors and symbols will help pilots to easily identify main controls, reducing the effect of factors such as pilot not being oriented, radical layout controls change on the systematic startup procedure, and the fact that the designer didn't consider pilot needs during war. From a schedule standpoint, we think that this alternative will take long time to implement because it will need to be implemented on all existing plane fleets. We consider cost to be moderate. Resources requirement will be high because of need to update all planes. For effectiveness, we think it will be moderate. Our last top alternative is to implement a procedure to ensure that all pilots on a base are properly oriented on any new plane before this plane is brought to the base. This will address the fact of having pilots not oriented on all planes. Since they will be oriented, there will be no effect of a radical change on the control layout. And this will explicitly address the fact of the procedural issue of integrating new planes into an existing fleet. For schedule, we said that this should be pretty easy to implement. For cost, we have moderate because you will have to implement this procedure across all bases of the Air Force. We think we will need low resources, and we rank the effectiveness of this alternative as very effective if the procedure is followed.